One day, Tom was in an accident and fell into a coma. As usual, when I went to visit, Yasmin, who claimed to be Tom's mistress, appeared and said, "I was given this letter by your daughter, Sophia. She asked me to read it in secret from Tom." Reading the letter made me pale. At the same time, I remembered all the terrible things Tom had done and said to me in the past. People who can afford to should pay. Can we please stop with the weird tradition that men should work like in the old days? Looking back, I wonder if Tom was always after my money. After looking back and forth between the sleeping Tom and Yasmin several times, I sighed and asked, "So, what do you want me to do?" Without hesitation, Yasmin answered, "Please divorce Tom." She seemed serious. I still don't understand what she's thinking, but I'm sure she's sincere about wanting a divorce. I spoke to Tom with a voice colder than ice. "Wake up. My name is Lily. I'm an office worker at a company in New York. I just turned 50 the other day, and my husband, Tom, is a year younger at 49. Our daughter, Sophia, just graduated from college a few months ago, became a working adult, and moved out, making our home much quieter than before. We got married over 20 years ago. Tom and I found common ground in music, hit it off from there, and started going out together. Half a year after we started dating, Tom suddenly said he wanted to quit his job. He had been on bad terms with his coworkers for a while and said it was mentally exhausting, so he wanted to find a job that suited him better. I empathized with Tom and supported his decision. When Tom found a new job and our lives stabilized, we decided it was time to get married. After 1.5 years of dating and 6 months of living together, 2 years in total, I thought I knew Tom well, but I never imagined what would come later. "Sorry, Lily. I've been a burden on you," Tom said, clasping his hands in front of me. We moved to a new house after getting married, but just before moving, Tom revealed he didn't have the financial ability to pay the rent. "It's okay, it's just this once. We're married now, so we should help each other out from here on." I said it calmly to avoid any conflict, but inside, I was irritated. This should have been obvious before signing the lease. Yet, Tom relied on my income and kept silent until the last minute. As a compromise, we decided to each put $1,000 into savings every month and live off the rest. However, Tom frowned at this suggestion, saying, "I just changed jobs and don't have the extra money to save. $1,000 a month. It's not impossible, but my company doesn't offer many allowances, and it's mostly out of pocket. Maybe we can wait until things settle down?" I was speechless. These issues were hidden or intentionally obscured when we were living together. Seeing Tom's irresponsible nature firsthand made me want to sigh. "All right, then the car we were planning to buy, let's wait until your income stabilizes before you buy it." "Sure." So far, so good. I thought that in about 6 months, Tom would get used to his job and start to think about our household more. But even after 3 months, and then 6, Tom kept saying he wasn't ready because he hadn't adjusted to his job or wanted to think more about the car. His salary was low because he was a new employee, and he complained about his low take-home pay even with overtime. Yet, he often worked overtime almost every night, and when a new game came out, he didn't hesitate to spend nearly $2,000 on the game and the console. While claiming to be short on money, Tom's lavish spending raised my suspicions. When I confronted him, he said, "I believe investing in oneself is important. No matter how tough times are, not forgetting to reward myself is what made me who I am today." And with that, the conversation ended. Days like this continued, and a few months after our marriage, I felt ill at work and was told by my boss to go home early for my health. As I was about to park my car, I noticed an unfamiliar car in our parking spot. Wondering what to do, I contacted the property manager, and after checking the surveillance footage, it was clear the car belonged to a woman in her mid-20s. It seemed someone had invited her over and decided to save on visitor parking fees by using the open spot. For now, the manager unlocked an extra space for visitors, so I parked there and went home. As I fumbled with my keys at the door, I heard some noises inside. Tom was supposed to be at work, so could it be a burglar? But then, the door opened, and Tom came out. "Hey, Lily. Aren't you supposed to be at work?" When I mirrored his question, he awkwardly mentioned he had the day off suddenly. Feeling unwell, I simply responded, "Oh, I see," and didn't press any further. Looking back, had I confronted Tom about my suspicions then, maybe things wouldn't have come to this. After explaining why I came home early, Tom hurriedly ushered me to the bedroom. Mentioning the unknown car in our parking spot, I told him my car was now in the manager's reserved space. Tom said he'd move it later and left the room. Resting idly, it wasn't long before I heard Tom leave and return, cheerfully announcing, "I moved the car back for you." I was momentarily puzzled but just thanked him for now. That night, I went to bed without doing much else. Surprisingly, Tom had taken care of some household chores that day. From that day on, Tom didn't do anything particularly strange, and as normal days continued, I completely forgot about the possibility of him having an affair. After our daughter, Sophia, was born and we were caught up in raising her, before I knew it, she had come of age, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as parenting duties eased. I'm still at the same job. Meanwhile, Tom has changed jobs several times since then, always using the transition as an excuse for not contributing much to our living expenses. "Come on, enough already. If you don't pitch in for the living expenses, it's tough on me too." But my words never seemed to reach Tom. "What? Are you saying I'm a failure? Lily, I didn't think you were such a cold-hearted person." Our arguments became more frequent, and I was emotionally drained. Still, having our lovely daughter Sophia around helped me muster the strength to carry on. It seems Tom has no intention of supporting our family or working together. Realizing he'll never change, I thought it might be better if I just became the breadwinner. Of course, I bought the new car with my savings, and I shouldered most of Sophia's education costs. But Tom takes it for granted. People who can afford should pay. Can we drop the old-fashioned notion that men should work? I argued that Tom, earning less and not contributing to child-rearing, should at least do his share of the household chores. However, Tom, interpreting everything to his advantage, dodged the responsibility. "Nah, women are better at household chores. I'm not good at that stuff." I realized it's faster to do things myself than to ask Tom for help. There came a point when I thought this way. Juggling work, household chores, and childcare, I barely had the time or energy to think about anything other than my kids and job. But at 50, considering the physical toll, and with Sophia now graduated from college and living independently, I've finished paying off our loans, so there's no need to work so hard anymore. I told my boss I was quitting. One day, coming home from work as usual, Tom wasn't back yet, and the house was dark. This was nothing new, so I went about preparing dinner, waiting for a call from Tom, who had gone to a gig. Lately, he quit his job again to do odd jobs. I've stopped being surprised or commenting on it, but then I remembered a movie I wanted to watch and got absorbed in it on a streaming site, and before I knew it, 2 hours had passed. Checking my phone, there was no message from Tom. It was unusually late, and I started to worry something had happened when, conveniently, Tom called. Picking up, it wasn't Tom but an unknown woman's voice on the line. She said Tom had been in an accident and was now in a coma, asking me to come to the hospital immediately. The caller identified herself as a nurse, and when I arrived at the hospital, there was Tom, unconscious on the bed. Just when parenting had finally settled down, Tom was involved in a tragic accident, and I felt plunged into deep despair. Ever since, I've been visiting Tom in the hospital whenever I could find the time. Though I had told my boss I was quitting, leaving immediately wasn't an option. The earliest I could leave was next month, and there was still a lot of handover work to do. I had informed Sophia that her father was in a coma after an accident. Sophia had just started her job, and I knew it was her busiest and most challenging period. Of course, I understood her worry, but I assured her I would manage for now, and she could visit when things settled down. However, Sophia, concerned not only for Tom but also for my health amidst my visits, would occasionally come to see us. Still, Tom showed no signs of waking up, and a week had passed. I kept talking to Tom, hoping for any sign of recovery. According to the senior nurse, who appeared to be about my age, recovery from his condition was highly unlikely. When I heard this, I felt despair. The young doctor, who claimed to be in charge of Tom, hadn't said much about his condition, leaving most of the talking to the head nurse, which I found slightly concerning. But I knew nothing about the medical world, and it wasn't my place to question the professionals. I forced myself to swallow my doubts. Tom remained unresponsive. I knew that talking to him wouldn't necessarily make a difference, but I couldn't help wishing for him to wake up. Though Tom hadn't been much involved in housework or childcare, it was only natural for me to worry. After all, we had shared our lives together. "Please, come back to me." As I whispered this, holding Tom's hand, there was a knock at the door. Responding, a young woman I didn't recognize entered and started to look uneasy. Wondering who she could be, she hesitated, struggling to find words. After a few minutes of silence, she finally spoke up. "I was asked to deliver this letter by your daughter, Sophia. She wanted you to read it in secret from Tom." Shocked, I watched as the woman, introducing herself as Yasmin. "Nice to meet you, I'm Yasmin." And slowly handed me the letter. I was puzzled why Sophia's name came up and why Yasmin had such a letter. And why did Yasmin know Tom, especially suggesting to read it in secret? Many questions began to flood my mind, but I took a deep breath to stay calm. Given Tom's coma, I figured it was okay to read the letter here. And as I unfolded it, I hastily began to undress Tom after finishing the short message. The shocking reality before me left me speechless and in despair. "What is the meaning of this?" At that moment, I thought I saw Tom's eyelids move slightly, turning slowly towards Yasmin. Her expression was unreadable. "Who exactly are you?" I asked cautiously, to which Yasmin replied with an apologetic look. "I'm Sophia's friend from high school." With everything happening so suddenly, it was hard to process, but Yasmin did indeed appear to be around Sophia's age. Pressing her about her relationship with Tom, she claimed to be his mistress. "I've been struggling with when to tell you. But knowing you were in the picture, I thought I had no chance. Yet, I didn't want to live with regrets, so I came to tell you." I looked to the heavens, overwhelmed by the bizarre situation of my daughter's friend revealing an affair with my husband, and herself bringing a letter from Sophia. After glancing between Tom and Yasmin several times, I sighed and asked, "So, what do you want from me?" Without hesitation, Yasmin answered, "Please, divorce Tom." She seemed serious. While I couldn't understand her reasoning, I was sure she genuinely wanted the divorce. There were so many things I wanted to confront her about, but first, I needed to deal with Tom's situation. With a cold voice, I told Tom, "Wake up." Tom remained unresponsive. But it was clear that this was nothing but an act. Never could I have imagined things turning out this way. "Enough already." Losing my patience, I reached for Tom's neck as he lay pretending to be asleep, and he immediately jumped up. "Damn, that's cold." Tom's loud voice filled the private room, creating an indescribable atmosphere. "Oh, so you could recover from your coma easily. Maybe I should have tried this from the start, huh?" I asked without changing my expression, and Tom awkwardly looked away. Usually bothered by my cold hands, I never thought they'd come in handy like this. As you can see, Tom was never really in a coma. If he were truly comatose, a slightly chilly touch wouldn't have him waking up like this. We were told he fell into a coma due to injuries sustained in an accident, including abdominal damage and brain trauma, but Sophia's letter said otherwise. There wasn't any accident, let alone injuries or damage. "Mom, something's definitely wrong here." So, I boldly decided to lift his shirt to check for any abdominal injuries first. But there was no bandage, just his unmarred side. "So, the only thing here is that impressive belly fat, huh?" I joked, and Tom's face turned red as he trembled. That means the bandages on his head, the IVs, everything was a lie to create the illusion that Tom was injured and in a coma. It means the hospital was in on it. Now that he was awake, there was no turning back for Tom, and I pressed on. Explain everything from the start. And that includes your affair with Yasmin, spill it all. What are you planning here? What's your relationship with the hospital? Answer me. As I confronted Tom, he murmured resignedly. I wanted a divorce. That's why. That's why? You concocted this ridiculous plan and dragged so many people into it just for that? Well, overwhelmed by my questioning, Tom shrank back and fell silent. If only he had told me straightforwardly. Now that Sophia is an adult and living independently, there's no need to hesitate over finances or child-rearing concerns about divorce. Gray divorces are common enough. If he was so unhappy with our marriage, he could have just said so. But he couldn't, could he? You thought if you brought up divorce directly, I'd demand alimony, knowing about your affair. So, you pretended to be in a care-needing state, hoping I'd choose to leave on my own, right? Tom nodded silently. Such a roundabout and bold strategy made me sigh. Though I had suspected Tom might be cheating recently, now that child-rearing is over. I belong with Yasmin. Sophia was an accident, but of course, she's my child, so I thought I'd endure until she was independent. But I've reached my limit. I didn't want to live with an old lady like you anymore. His blunt words made me dizzy, but I knew I couldn't show weakness. Does Yasmin agree? I asked, and after a moment of hesitation, Yasmin slowly nodded. Seeing their resolute determination, I realized resisting was futile. It made me wonder what the last 20+ years were for, leaving me feeling empty. Unperturbed by my feelings, Tom insisted on divorcing me to be with Yasmin and his family. Realizing there was no point in making excuses now that the truth was out, he seemed to accept his fate. An old man at 50, chasing after a young girl and demanding a divorce from his wife, was nothing short of disgraceful. Though I had much to say, my decision was firm. Fine. We can divorce. At that, Tom's face brightened with a nod, while Yasmin looked uncomfortable, seemingly with more to say. I decided to leave the painful space of the hospital. Remember, you are the perpetrators. Whatever happens, don't try to escape responsibility. Especially you, Tom, got it? I sharply warned, and Tom inhaled sharply, having never seen me so angry. After a while, Tom woke up from his supposed coma and was discharged. Returning home as if nothing happened, he started packing his things awkwardly upon seeing me. I asked without even looking at him. Your family is Yasmin, right? Why don't you go back to her? Stammering, Tom said, we're not officially a family yet. I sighed, not knowing how many times I had done so. Fine. Do as you please. At that, Tom oddly seemed relieved and retreated to his room. Watching Tom, still oblivious to the gravity of his actions, I couldn't help but smirk and said, by the way, since you were hospitalized under false pretenses, you could be sued for fraud, you know? Tom's actions came to an abrupt halt. Huh? Fraud? Who would do such a thing? It seemed he truly hadn't realized. Sighing, I pulled out my insurance card from my wallet, but he still didn't get it. So, I broke it down for him. Who do you think is paying for your hospital stay? Huh? It's obviously me. Do you know what percentage you're responsible for? And the bill indicates you had surgery, which means you'll exceed your out-of-pocket limit. So, who do you think pays the rest? Obviously, it comes from the health insurance you're enrolled in. After explaining, Tom pondered for a few minutes before turning pale as it dawned on him. Normally, there's nothing wrong with being hospitalized, but claiming for a fake illness and surgery, and then billing that the health insurance is clearly fraudulent. I informed him that if I reported this, he'd immediately be in trouble with the police. Tom, trembling and crying, begged, please, anything but that. I couldn't believe he was just now realizing the implications, while he mumbled something about having paid his share at the front desk, so it shouldn't be a problem. I'm not an expert, so I don't know the exact legal terms. But there's no doubt Tom pretending to be sick would lead to some criminal or civil liabilities. Just to be sure, I also asked, "You didn't apply for a life insurance payout, did you? Got a diagnosis certificate?" Tom froze. "That would be insurance fraud. This time, you've committed fraud against both the health insurance and the life insurance company." "Well, such a simple trick would be easily discovered," I said, mocking him as I walked past the motionless Tom. "Don't stay in your little dream world forever. What you've done isn't just cheating, it's a criminal act." With that, I left the room, carrying my pre-packed suitcase. I had no intention of staying in that apartment once Tom woke up. Leaving the home where I felt Sophia's growth was regrettable, but it was better than being reminded of Tom's betrayal. I searched for a vacancy at a hotel and decided to make that my base for the time being. Hours later, Tom contacted me. "What are we supposed to do now?" As if we could decide that right now. His panicked, tearful babble ignited my anger again. After raising my voice, Tom fell silent. Taking a deep breath to calm down, I said, "From now on, I don't want to speak to you unless it's through a lawyer. Please, just leave me alone for now," and hung up. There's no time to be down. I resolved to sort out my feelings today and prepare to face Tom head-on from tomorrow. Tom continued to send incomprehensible Romeo emails, all of which I ignored. Weeks of ignoring him later, I decided to hand everything over to a lawyer and met Tom face-to-face for the first time since that day. Tom looked gaunt and pale, probably from stress. I presented him with divorce papers and a document stating conditions. Tom was stunned after reading the documents. "You want me to pay everything in one go? That's unreasonable. Yasmin knew she was married and still, she had an affair with me. Obviously, she should pay for the sin." "What do you think of Yasmin? If you love her, just accept the condition and pay for your sin." Unable to argue, Tom just sulked in silence. It was absurd for him, the cheater, to lash out at me, but I remained composed. Claiming, "This is extortion. Your lawyer is too aggressive." Seeing my lawyer bewildered, I couldn't help but smile wryly. At the same time, Tom's words "just an affair" were unbelievable. In front of Tom, I slammed down photos proving his infidelity. Suddenly, Tom's movements halted, and his eyes slowly turned towards me. The flow of conversation had clearly shifted, and Tom wore an expression of disturbance like never before. "How did you get this? Lily, how much do you know?" What I had presented was a photo of Tom, another woman, and Yasmin, all together. "That day I left work early. You've been cheating with the woman who parked her car in our spot, haven't you?" I was curious. "After I came back, I heard you immediately moved the car back. Why were you able to move the car right away? Was it because your lover was actually at our house, and you sent her away as soon as I returned?" "It's not as simple as that, is it?" I said, and Tom remained silent, as if I had hit the mark. I hadn't thought much of it at the time because I was feverish, but upon reflection, there were many suspicious points. "Tom, you were off work, the woman parked in our spot, and you were enjoying your affair at home until I came back unexpectedly, right? You pretended to be concerned, pushed me into the bedroom during that brief moment, and managed to let her leave and move her car. And all this while, you were playing the family man with me and Sophia, while secretly building another family with Yasmin and her folks. You're the worst, you know." As I sharply put it, tears welled up in Tom's eyes, but he managed to speak. "I didn't mean for things to turn out this way. If you can't take full responsibility, then don't have children. I'm sorry." Tom had been cheating for over 20 years. Throughout that time, Tom rarely contributed to the household financially, and of course, he didn't do chores either. Though he did act like a father during school events, and never disappeared on weekends suddenly. After the day I left work early, Tom hadn't shown any suspicious behavior, so I thought the cheating had stopped, but I was completely mistaken. I heard it from Yasmin herself. "You lied about being her lover in front of me, trying to break you two apart on your real lovers, your real affair partner's command." Tom, trembling and clenching his teeth, could only stutter meaningless words. Thinking it was time to give him a push, I continued. Never would I have thought you've been leading a double life for over 20 years. Constantly changing jobs was just an excuse to hide your income. You were actually giving money to Yasmin and her family, leaving nothing for us. Unbelievable. To think my own husband could be such a despicable person. You and that woman, Kelly, were behind everything. Suddenly, Tom stood up, then began to prostrate himself on the ground. Kelly was the head nurse who had informed me about Tom's condition. Back then, she was just a regular nurse without a boyfriend. She fell in love with Tom at first sight despite knowing he had a wife, me, and still engaged in a relationship with him. Yasmin was the result of that relationship. She was raised by Kelly, being told, "Your father is currently living tied to another woman. Once her child becomes an adult, he promised to become a family with us, so just endure until then." However, Yasmin was shocked to learn that her father was also Sophia's, her best friend's father, and couldn't bear to betray her friend, even under her mother's pressure. One day, Kelly, having graduated and started working as a nurse, told Yasmin about a terrifying plan. "To get your father back, we'll make it seem like he's been in an accident and hospitalized. You, pretending to be transporting a patient, will sneak him into a private room. I've paid off the administrative staff and a trainee doctor. Then, pose as his lover and drive that vixen away. Once she finds out her husband is cheating with a woman her daughter's age, she'll back off." Despite following Kelly's orders, Yasmin also contacted Sophia, who, as it turned out, was a police officer. Though it was outside her jurisdiction, Sophia noticed something odd about her father's accident and started investigating on her own until she uncovered the truth. "There was no accident involving my father, yet he's hospitalized. Yasmin, do you know something? Why is my father in your hospital?" Unable to bear it anymore, Yasmin confessed everything, overwhelmed by the betrayal towards her best friend. Sophia, upon learning the truth, reprimanded Yasmin but calmly assessed that the root of all evil was Kelly and Tom. She immediately wanted to inform me, but at that moment, Yasmin said, "I want to take responsibility for my actions." With Kelly keeping a close watch in the hospital, speaking carelessly wasn't an option. Therefore, they concocted a bizarre scenario where Yasmin, posing as a lover, delivered a letter from Sophia to me. Naturally, I found this situation suspicious and cleverly used a detective to uncover the truth. Yasmin, unable to come forward herself, hoped I would notice and did her best to send an awkward SOS. Tom, oblivious to everything, thought all this was part of Kelly's plan, rejoicing at the thought of becoming a real family with Yasmin and her. Understanding he treated Yasmin not merely as a lover but spoke of becoming a family, I felt satisfied. After sharing everything I knew with Tom, he finally looked up. But his face was expressionless, staring blankly. Overwhelmed by betrayal and loss, especially from Yasmin, whom he thought he would finally live with, he agreed to my terms without resistance. Later, I received an angry call from Kelly. "You seduced my daughter. We were so close, and you've ruined everything. It's all because you interfered with the plans for Tom and me." Her misplaced anger brought me to my limit. "You have no right to complain, being a criminal who engaged in a relationship and even had a child knowing there was another partner involved." Kelly, called out as a criminal, got angry. But she seemed to realize there was no way out and appeared to be making a last-ditch effort. I calmly told her, "Once things settle down with Tom, Yasmin and I will go to the police station and explain everything." Kelly panicked. "What? No way! Stop it! What am I supposed to do then? Yasmin said she's cutting ties with me, and I'll end up in prison." "Well, good. Go to prison and atone for your crimes." "No, please." As a mother of a daughter the same age, I was embarrassed for Kelly. I felt sorry for Yasmin, but I knew there was no need to worry about her anymore. After the divorce was finalized, I accompanied Yasmin, who decided to turn herself in, to the police station. Just before entering, Yasmin turned to me and said, The first day we met, I truly thought it was best for him and you, Lily, to part ways. Sophia told me how wonderful and strong a mother you were. That's why I genuinely wanted you two to divorce. A cheater like him doesn't deserve you. Gone was the frightened look of our first encounter, replaced by a face free of burdens. Later on, Tom and I finalized our divorce. My in-laws had already been informed, so they knew Tom had no money and covered the costs, ensuring we wouldn't be bothered any further. Now at 50, Tom is embarrassed to rely on his 70-something parents, facing scorn from neighbors and desperately job hunting. Shortly after the divorce, Tom was interrogated by the police and then indicted. Kelly, involved in the fraud, was arrested, and Tom, along with the medical staff who conspired, received suspended sentences due to their remorse. Of course, the hospital is suing them for damages, and they face a hellish future. Kelly, the mastermind behind the elaborate fraud who dragged others into her scheme, received a prison sentence. Yasmin, though detained for her role in the fraud, received a suspended sentence due to her remorse, cooperation with the investigation, and the pressure from her mother. She disappeared. But I believe she's starting anew, given her relieved expression the last time we met. Sophia, as a police officer and former best friend, found it hard to forgive Yasmin but still hoped for her rehabilitation. Now, I can finally live a peaceful life. Sophia has made a name for herself as a police officer, fulfilling her dream of joining the detective division in her late 20s. She started dating a colleague from the detective division and married 5 years later. Now focused on parenting, Sophia has no regrets about resigning, wanting to raise her child with love, just like I did. I look forward to quietly supporting my daughter's family and watching my grandchildren grow. You heard our conversation yesterday, didn't you? My eldest son and his wife are coming back home for the birth of their child, so I need you to move your stuff out to the yard. Excuse me? You can't have kids anyway. You don't help with my son's work. So, the least you could do is make some room. And I'm paying $10,000 in rent. This is getting too tiresome to deal with. I live with my mother-in-law, but now she wants me out of the house because my brother-in-law and his wife are returning. My mother-in-law, brother-in-law, his wife, and my husband. This house is full of problems. I've been trying to keep things running smoothly, but it's becoming a hassle to think about it all. I'm done thinking. Okay, I'll leave. But I can't just put my belongings in the yard, so I'll come back later to pick them up. You're leaving? Thank you. That's a big help. Ignoring my pleased mother-in-law, I started packing my things and left the house. 7 seconds after stepping out the door, I took out my phone and called a junk removal service. Once I stopped thinking, no one could stop my actions. I'm Anna, a 40-year-old IT consultant. My husband Tom is also 40 and runs 3 restaurants as a sole proprietor. We're both 40, and people often assume we've been married a long time and have a kid or two, but we're actually newlyweds. We both lived as workaholics and didn't marry until this age. I had given up on marriage just before turning 40, but a random visit to a bar after work changed my mind. Is this your first time here? Yes, that's right. I had been curious about it for a while, but it was hard for me to go in alone because the store is so stylish. But I worked hard today, so I decided to go in as a reward to myself. I was relieved to find a counter where it was easy for a loner to spend time. We have many women who come alone, so feel free to visit anytime. My husband, Tom, chatted with me with a smile as I sat at the end of the bar. I knew he was just trying to attract a new customer. But for me, who had no casual acquaintances to dine with at this age, even this kind of customer service felt nice. Feeling comfortable in Tom's restaurant, I started visiting frequently. As a regular, I always sat at the end of the bar, and it became normal for Tom to chat with me while I ate. What does an IT consultant do? Introducing IT to companies, strategic planning. I've worked with restaurants too. Once, I suggested a tablet-based ordering system to reduce labor costs and improve efficiency. Oh, the system that's become common? How much does that cost? Well, for a place like this, it would cost about this much. No way, no way. That's too much for a small business like mine. As I punched numbers into my phone calculator and showed him the screen, Tom shook his head and hands vigorously. He's curious and always eager to learn from our conversations. He's looking for ways to apply new knowledge to his work. Even though it looked like just a pleasant conversation, I was slowly drawn to his dedication to his work. Likewise, Tom grew fond of me, seeing that I was a hard-working person. I'm always busy with work and can't talk much. How about we go out for dinner sometime? Excited about the chance to dine with a restaurateur, I eagerly agreed. I was thrilled to be asked out by my husband, but saying something so girlish at nearly 40 would be embarrassing, so let's just leave it at that. My husband didn't just ask me out that one day, he continued to invite me out for meals occasionally. It's natural for adult men and women who frequently dine together to develop a romantic relationship. We started dating, and 2 years later, as we both turned 40, we decided to get married. Feeling shy about being a bride at 40, I asked my husband to skip the wedding ceremony and just took some photos of us with dressed up. After we got married, I moved from my apartment to my husband's house. His house is a 3-story building with a garden and parking, located in a high-end area. The rent is apparently around $10,000. My husband was living there with his mother. Some might think it's unthinkable to live with a mother-in-law right after getting married. But I'm 40, so I don't mind much. Plus, my mother-in-law is 70, and my father-in-law has passed away, so living together seemed necessary. When my husband suggested living with his mother, I immediately said it was okay. But after starting to live with my mother-in-law, I regretted accepting so quickly. When I moved into my husband's house, besides the bedroom for us, I even got a lavish office room for myself. His house seemed too big for just 2 people, with many spare rooms. Once I settled in, I asked my husband a simple question. Why do we need such a big house just for you and your mother? I said I have a brother 3 years older than me. He left home after college and I've lost touch with him for the most part. He hasn't been home at all, and it's been a few years since I've heard from him, and he's been moving from job to job and place to place. He's such a man that one day he might get into trouble and come back to me and Mom, right? So we decided to rent a bigger house. I think it's a little too big. Well, I got married and you came, so I guess it all worked out. My husband, while unboxing my books and arranging them on the shelf, talked about his brother Richard with a smile. From his story, it seems Richard is aimlessly hopping from job to job, but my husband doesn't think badly of him. Don't talk about that kid. What if he really comes back? My mother-in-law appeared at the doorway of what would be my office, seemingly checking on us. It appears she doesn't have a good opinion of him, unlike my husband. It's understandable for a mother to show a cold reaction to an eldest son who shirks his responsibilities. However, I'm worried that my husband and my mother-in-law might clash over his brother someday. Also, I'm not too fond of you either. Mom, come on. We're going to live together now, so stop saying things like that. I'm not saying you should leave. I just need to make things clear from the start. My mother-in-law walked away, her slippers making a padding sound. I'm sorry. I'll talk to her. It's okay. I got a similar talk when we met for the wedding. I'll build a relationship with your mother as we live together. I took a book from my husband's paused hands and placed it on the shelf. It seems she doesn't like my age. I'm 40, so it's not impossible to have children, but I guess it's a challenging thought. Also, Tom's elder brother Richard is not married and has no children. So, there's a high chance that my mother-in-law won't get to see her grandchildren. That's why she's disappointed and wishes Tom had married someone younger. To her, Richard, who doesn't fulfill his role as the eldest son, and I, who can't fulfill my role as a wife in her eyes, are probably the same. I understand her feelings, but I can't turn back the clock on my body, so there's nothing I can do about that. Once the move was completely finished and our married life officially began, my mother-in-law's coldness towards me became evident. She ignored me when I spoke and tried to have as little to do with me as possible. It's a bit lonely, but since there's no harassment or physical violence, I guess I should consider it okay for now. I can build a relationship with her over time. But more pressing is my concern for Tom. Are you okay with your work? No, it's pretty bad. I need to take action soon, but it's tough to arrange the finances. After dinner, Tom was sitting at the dining table, his head in his hands. I stopped doing the dishes and sat down in front of him to listen. These are tough times. Prices are soaring, expenses are climbing, and customers are tightening their wallet. There's no end in sight. If this keeps up, I might have to close another one of our stores. About a year into our marriage, the situation at Tom's restaurants worsened. One of the 3 stores had already closed, and it seemed another might have to shut down too. Seeing Tom's troubled face made me feel distressed. But my mother-in-law seemed unaffected by these troubles. You're Tom's wife, but you don't help out at the store. You just do your own job. Can you really say you're fulfilling your role as a wife? Our conversation was overheard by my mother-in-law in the living room. She hurled insults at me from her seat on the sofa. I wondered what she was thinking, but she has her own way of seeing things. Tom has been running his own restaurant for nearly 10 years, overcoming various challenges. I believe he'll pull through this time too. You, his wife, shouldn't be making that face. Are you trying to feed into his anxiety and make him fail? What a terrible wife! She shouted again from the living room to the dining room. Her words towards me were filled with spite and venom. I knew she wasn't just trying to fire me up. But she wasn't entirely wrong. I took her words positively and decided to support Tom to the fullest, smiling reassuringly at my anxious husband. A year later, just as she said, Tom managed to turn the situation around and avoided closing a second store. See, I told you! A stupid wife who can't even trust her husband. Don't drag Tom down! As a side effect, my mother-in-law, who had previously ignored me, started lashing out at me without reservation. The relationship with her might seem to have worsened, but since Tom's business is doing well, I'll consider it a break-even situation. I thought things were balancing out, but it turned out to be a clear negative for me. Tom, having stabilized the business and with a bit more money, seemed to get carried away, and I heard rumors about his affair. What on earth is he thinking? If there's extra money, there are surely better ways to spend it. Also, it's strange how bad situations tend to pile up. Having seen Tom's business revenue drop, I know this all too well. But I never thought it would happen to me. Tom. Richard called. From my brother? Yes. Richard's girlfriend is pregnant. That's great news. She's a 32-year-old who worked at the same bar. And, Tom, they ask something. What? You're being so formal all of a sudden. Richard is a freelancer, and so is his pregnant girlfriend. With a baby on the way, they're struggling. They asked if they could move into this house. And they want to work at your restaurant. I was contemplating how to confront Tom about the affair from the dining room. Then, my mother-in-law came into the living room and started talking to him. The conversation was about Richard, whom I've never met, and I was completely left out as they continued talking. It was a strange scene. She used to dislike Richard for not fulfilling his role as the eldest son. Yet now, she was asking Tom to welcome him. The reason was simple: the grandchild. She had given up hope of seeing a grandchild but now saw an opportunity and completely changed her stance. She was even planning to offer them a home and jobs. Tom, who never thought badly of Richard, had rented this big house for such a time. But the situation has changed, and now I'm here. Is it not odd to have Richard and his family move in? I looked at Tom in the living room from the dining area. He was looking back at me with a clearly troubled expression. Come on, it's a good thing. Richard is in trouble, and you, Tom, have the means to help him. Ah, okay, I got it. I sighed at Tom's inability to say no to his mother. I had hoped he would stand up to her, but it seems it was just wishful thinking. He kept glancing at me, probably worried about my reaction. The worsening relationship with my mother-in-law, Tom's affair, now living with Richard and his family, the problems just keep piling up. Overwhelmed and not knowing where to start, I decided to abandon thinking for today and just go to sleep. The next day, being a holiday and probably due to extreme mental fatigue, I slept in until late morning. Tom was at work, so it was just my mother-in-law and me at home. Dreading what she might say about my sleeping in, I reluctantly headed to the living room. "You sure slept in. Must be nice to have such leisure." Bracing myself for her usual nagging about not fulfilling my duties as a wife, I tensed up, ready for her words. However, what she said easily surpassed my expectations. "You heard Tom and me talking yesterday, right? Richard and his wife are coming back for a maternity leave visit, so move your stuff out to the yard." Excuse me? Was I still groggy from sleep? She really meant I should live in the yard? Or was she telling me to leave the house? You can't have kids anyway. You don't help with Tom's work. So, you should at least make room for Richard and his family. We have 2 spare rooms left, so if you leave and your office is free, we can have a bedroom and a nursery for Richard's family, and a storage room for their stuff. Don't you think the room count and usage are just perfect? It seemed she was indeed telling me to leave. But a storage room for Richard's family? I'm being kicked out to make room for a space that doesn't seem necessary. Originally, I was allowed to use the office because there were spare rooms, and I don't mind if it's gone. A bedroom for Tom and me is enough. Richard's family can live here without me leaving. Realizing that my mother-in-law now sees no reason for me to be in this house as a wife since she can see her grandchild. And I'm paying $10,000 in rent. I'm too tired to deal with all this. I decided to clear my mind and give my brain a rest. Silent with my mother-in-law, the only sound in the living room was the ticking of the clock. Okay, time to leave. Having rested my mind, I decided it's too much trouble to worry about what happens to Tom, my mother-in-law, Richard's family, and their future. I chose to leave the house. Understood. I'll leave. I can't put all my belongings in the yard, so I'll come back later to pick them up. You're leaving? Thank you. That helps. Ignoring my pleased mother-in-law, I started packing my things and left the house. 7 seconds after stepping out the door, I took out my phone and called a junk removal service. My decision, made after stopping my overthinking, couldn't be stopped by anyone. Let them all regret this choice later. Having left the house, I decided to stay at a hotel for the time being. I had called the junk removal service, but they needed some time to prepare. This worked out since I wanted some time too. 2 weeks after leaving, I rented an apartment and started living alone. I haven't heard from Tom since then. He probably thinks I'll come back eventually. The thought of Tom taking the current situation lightly infuriates me. However, today is the day after his restaurant's day off. I expect a call from Tom when he visits the restaurant for lunch prep. Hey! What's going on here? The restaurant is completely empty. Just as I thought, Tom called. I could explain over the phone, but it would be more efficient if your mom was there too. I'm heading to the house now, can you come back? You can't open the restaurant anyway, right? I couldn't help but laugh before hanging up, amused by Tom's reaction. He must be quite shocked. Still chuckling, I started getting ready to leave. What on earth is this? The restaurant's fridge, cooking equipment, tables, all the important stuff is gone. You did this, didn't you? Do you think you can get away with this for free? As soon as I arrived at the house, my mother-in-law started yelling at me. It seems Tom had explained half of the situation. There was an unfamiliar couple in the living room. Apparently Richard and his wife. They looked confused and anxious, not fully grasping the situation and my mother-in-law's extreme anger. Why would you do such a thing? The restaurant can't operate now. It's my restaurant. so there shouldn't be a problem with me starting the closing process or having the items I bought disposed of by a junk removal service, right? Huh? Your restaurant? What are you talking about? Why don't you explain, Tom? You haven't told your mom, have you? You remember that I still has the main restaurant and the second branch, and the second one was in a financial crisis, right? Yes, of course. You worked hard to turn it around, changing the tables, chairs, signboard, the restaurant's atmosphere, bringing in new cooking equipment, expanding the menu, and replacing the fridge and freezer to accommodate the new menu, right? Well, about that. Anna actually paid for those expenses. What? What do you mean? Hearing Tom's words, my mother-in-law looked perplexed. She seemed to be trying hard to understand, but probably lacked the full information to grasp everything. Tom continued, looking uncomfortable as if he was holding back a bathroom break. Seeing that this was going nowhere, I decided to explain. Before turning 40, I was single and working in IT consulting. We didn't have a wedding ceremony, nor did we buy a new house after getting married. So, I had saved up quite a bit of money. I lent Tom $200,000 to help turn around his struggling second restaurant branch. $200,000? But you can't just hand over such a large amount of money to your spouse, right? That's why I decided to buy the rights to the second branch and become its owner. I left most of the management to Tom, so there wasn't much for me to do as the owner. The only change was that Tom shifted his focus from the main branch to the second one for its recovery. When Tom's restaurant was in a crisis, I too showed my concern alongside him. It was when my mother-in-law yelled at me for not showing enough trust in my husband that I decided to support Tom to the fullest. My form of support was giving him the money I had saved during my single years. Tom, is this true? Yeah, it's true. She said it was okay if I failed and wasted the $200,000. She gave me the money. But since it was such a large amount, if it was going to fail anyway, she suggested becoming the owner. The plan was to pay back the borrowed $200,000 from the restaurant's earnings, but it was simpler for Anna to become the owner and have the restaurant's income go directly to her. It also meant that she could decide whether to close the restaurant or not.
It's a lie! Can something like that really happen?
I understand it's hard to believe hearing this all of a sudden. That's why I brought some evidence. I spread documents like the business license, transfer of rights agreement, and lease agreement on the table, proving that I was the owner of the restaurant. My mother-in-law's face turned red as she confirmed my name on those documents.
Why didn't you say anything about this?
You always talked about how you believed in Tom and how the restaurant was recovering, right? Even before we got married, you always encouraged Tom like that. He felt pressured by your words but tried to live up to your expectations, not wanting to disappoint you as the head of the household. You're pretty cold to people like me and Richard, who don't fulfill their roles, right? That's why Tom couldn't tell you he borrowed a large sum of money from me.
He could have just told me.
That's why Tom couldn't speak his mind, because she gets upset easily. People like my mother-in-law often don't realize they're putting pressure on others. They might think it's just a small thing to say, but for the one under pressure, it's a huge burden, not something they can easily talk about. And even if they did speak up, she would likely be disappointed and start complaining. It was essential not to let Tom's spirit break under her constant jabs, especially when the restaurant was finally turning around. That's why I kept quiet too. But I really wished she had refused when Richard and his family were coming back. Probably, Tom thought it was work-related and agreed without thinking much. Mom, Anna, I'm sorry. This situation is my fault for not being decisive enough. If I had managed the restaurant well from the start, Anna wouldn't have had to lend her money, and if I wasn't such a weakling, I could have told you the truth. If Anna decides to close the restaurant, then that's it. But what about the part-time workers? Don't worry, in the past 2 weeks, I've already informed everyone about closing the restaurant, and they've all understood. For those interested, I've arranged part-time work at other restaurants through my IT consulting contacts. That's a relief. That was my only concern. So everyone was in on this? Anna showing me an empty restaurant as a surprise and everyone keeping the closure from me. Tom. I'm sorry too. I've been pressuring you. And Anna, I'm sorry for everything up to now. I won't tell you to leave again. Tom and my mother-in-law apologized, and it seemed as if everything was resolving nicely. But that's a misunderstanding. I'm far from being satisfied, and the discussion is far from over. Let's settle this matter next.
What, this? A divorce paper?
When I placed the divorce papers on the table, Tom picked them up in shock.
What does this mean? Why a divorce? This is supposed to be a reconciliation, right?
Don't just assume we've reconciled. You might think it's a secret, but I know about your affair with the part-timer. All the part-time workers knew about it too.
That's just a rumor. You can't say things like that without proof.
I displayed an image on my smartphone that a part-time worker had sent me and placed it on the table, amidst the scattered documents. This, a photo of entering a hotel. It was taken by one of the part-timers. If you leave the restaurant together and walk towards the nearby hotel district, anyone can take such evidence, not just the police or detectives. Did getting the second branch back on track give you too much confidence? You really got carried away. As the owner of the restaurant, I couldn't do much in terms of day-to-day operations. But I couldn't just stay away from the restaurant, so I made it a point to visit from time to time. That's when the part-time workers complained to me about Tom's affair and asked for my help. When I promised to handle it, they provided incredible support. The information about Tom's affair was leaked, they sent me proof, and even kept silent about the restaurant's closure from him. Wait a minute. Closing the second branch and a divorce. What's going to happen to the rent for this place? The rent for this place? What do you mean? I haven't mentioned that yet. I've been paying the entire rent of $10,000 a month for this house. Is that also true? It's true. When the restaurant's revenue started falling, Anna started paying half of it. But as revenue continued to drop, the amount she had to cover increased. Eventually, I ended up paying it all. $10,000 a month is the same as my salary. So, I paid all the rent, and Tom covered other living expenses like food and utilities. So, if Tom gets divorced and only has the main restaurant left, obviously, living here won't be an option anymore. Tom and my mother-in-law seemed deflated after hearing my words. They slumped as if they had exhausted themselves in a boxing match. Richard and his wife, now somewhat understanding the situation, hesitantly joined the conversation.
What? What does that mean? We came back here and can't live here? Wait, Richard. This is different from what we heard. We thought everything would be fine once we got back home.
Sorry, Richard. Right now, I don't have the means to help you with a restaurant or a house.
Come on, do something. We're having a baby. At least give me a job.
We have enough part-timers. In fact, we need to cut down on staff costs.
Tom will work hard, so just wait a bit longer. That's what I'm talking about. Stop saying things like that. Hey! What about my house and job now?
Tom, my mother-in-law, and Richard started arguing about their future lives. Richard's wife, whose name I still didn't know, looked uncomfortably out of place. I had delivered the news about the restaurant's closure and the divorce, so my business here was done. I was tired of constantly trying to smooth things over with Tom and his family. And I refused to live with Richard and his wife. I don't care what happens to this house next. They can discuss it amongst themselves. I left the house amidst their shouting. After that, having evidence of the affair, I was able to divorce Tom smoothly. I could have demanded alimony for the affair, but I had a job and didn't need the money. I wanted as little to do with my ex-husband and his family as possible, so I didn't ask for any compensation. After our divorce, my ex-husband Tom, unable to afford the rent, had to leave the house with his whole family. At that time, financially and emotionally strained, Tom, who had been taking care of his mother, argued that it was actually Richard's responsibility as the eldest son. Of course, Richard, who had come back without any money, couldn't possibly take care of her. This led to an ugly fight between the brothers about who should take care of their mother. In the end, with no income, Tom had to take her in, but this fight ruined the relationship between the brothers. As a result, Richard and his wife disappeared again, cutting off all contact. Witnessing the brothers dispute over her, the mother-child relationship also deteriorated. Now, Tom and his mother are living together reluctantly in a smaller apartment. It's not as spacious as the previous house, and they have to see each other all the time, but they hardly talk, creating an awkward atmosphere in the house. My actions, prompted by thinking ahead, resulted in the breakdown of a family relationship. After the divorce, I first dealt with closing down the restaurant. It was a bit of a hassle, but as the owner, it was my responsibility. However, the fridge, cooking equipment, tables, and chairs I had removed were fairly new, so I managed to sell them at a good price. So, adding just a little more money allowed me to finish the restaurant's closure. Though it was a brief period, being a restaurant owner and handling its closure was an experience. I believe these experiences will be useful in my IT consulting work someday. I guess work suits me better than marriage. Convinced of this, I continue to work hard today.